Well, thank you. So it's such a wonderful thing to be able to talk with you and to see the development which is going on in your part of the world and to know what's going on in other places is pretty exciting, but still early days because there's so much to do. Um, I want to share my screen, so I'm going to try that now. Hello to everyone, and really glad to be here. And as you know, I'm John Liu, and this was me when I was actually young. Um, so at 26 years old, I went to China and I helped to open the CBS News Bureau eventually, and then I worked for CBS News and other TV companies for about 15 years, covering big geopolitical events. But it was something else that um, transformed me. I was asked by the World Bank in the middle of the 1990s to film the baseline study in the upper and middle reaches of the Yellow River in the Loess Plateau. Now, the Loess Plateau is the cradle of Chinese civilization. So this is where the Han race emerged to be the dominant culture. And this is the birthplace of the largest ethnic group on the planet. So it was really odd to me when I came and it was massively degraded and there was virtually no vegetation there. And I couldn't understand how the largest ethnic group on the planet could come from a place that basically looked like the moon. And obviously, it had been once a very fertile and productive place because it had given birth to this enormous um, culture and civilization. But when I went there, it looked like this. And so I spent quite a lot of time studying how does a place turn into something that looks like this. And I found it was kind of like doing ecological forensics. So the crime scene was there, but you know, who done it? What was the weapon, and also what was the motive for destroying this area? And so we found that basically we could tell what had happened and we could see the impacts. The hydrology was totally disrupted so that the soils were becoming the geologic materials in the subsoils, but the organic layer was gone and it was eroding away. And as it eroded away, it stopped infiltrating and retaining moisture and it became worse and worse. So if you can, I don't know if you know the Grand Canyon, but if you can imagine that every stream turns into the Grand Canyon, that was a little bit like what it was. And what the Chinese said was, okay, now they have a strange government there. And what they said was, all right, basically everything that you were doing before, cutting trees, growing crops on the sides of hills, and free ranging goats and sheep, all of that is now illegal. So when they said all of that is all illegal, basically the people had nothing to do because that's all that they were doing. And so the government said, all right, look, we wanted to transition to something that's sustainable. So you're going to have to learn something else. So they basically hired everybody to restore the landscape. And they did this for about 10 years. They had really, they had $500 million on a revolving loan. And so they asked everybody and they paid everybody to participate in this. And from 1994 to 2009, they were able to transform this landscape by massive participation. But if you realize that it's 45,000 square kilometers that they're transforming, then the cost and over 10 years is not very high. And the value that was created by completely transforming this area is enormous, even from a productivity point of view, but also from the climate mitigation and adaptation, or the protection and restoration of biodiversity. And I mean, essentially, it was a transformational change. And when I saw this, I realized they're bringing back the hydrological cycle. They're bringing back the biodiversity. They're bringing back the fertility in the soil. And that I had been covering in all these television networks and all the geopolitical and economic thinkers are thinking that what's going on with politics and economics was important. And I looked at this and I thought, this is vastly more important, because if you can restore this massive degraded areas, we could theoretically restore all degraded lands on the earth. And when I saw this, I just thought, well, you know, that's amazing. And that's what we need to do. So basically, I stopped being a journalist and started studying ecology. And that's what I've been doing and communicating about this for the last 30 years, because this is more important than any of the things that I saw when I was young. And now I'm 70 years old, and it's actually, you know, no one refers to the work I did when I was young, because that's old news. But everything that I've done in ecology continues to be studied. And I started to realize that what I was seeing was the result of evolutionary succession, that at an early point in time, we had, I'm afraid I've got the wrong, is it the wrong one? I don't know. Anyway, so gradually, I started to realize that this was so important and that it was understandable. And as I started to work on this, I realized that the successful places that I've been seeing, the restoration was done with people, and that the governments and the scientists, even, well, if nobody understood any of it, then it's pretty important. But really, the most important was that there was a collective intelligence and a collective intention to do this. And then when you did this, basically, we changed from competition with one another to collaboration with one another. And that this led to such enormous results that it seems like it's the next level of human civilization. Basically, if we are to survive, and if we were to have peace, and now you can see the ecological disruptions that are taking place, you can see the wars that are taking place, and yet here is this possibility to restore healthy systems. And that what I realized was that the values of this materialism, it's all about junk. It just ends up in the junk pile, and it's not nearly as valuable as the ecological function. And that if we want to survive, and we want our children to have the best possible future and future generations, that we're deciding quality of life for future generations by what we understand and what we do. And I saw that in the functional ecosystems, in the naturally developed ones, that you had principles. There's always more biodiversity, always more biomass, and always more accumulated organic matter. And that after human civilization began, we began to reverse evolutionary succession. And we had less biodiversity, less biomass, and less accumulated organic matter. And this altered the infiltration and retention of moisture, the soil fertility. It changed the gas exchanges with the atmosphere, and that this was a highly dangerous path that humanity was on. And I started to think about philosophically that we were looking at really the very, very long period. This is sort of strangely edited, excuse me. So feel free to find my collected writings there. But basically, I started to think about life and like eternity and infinity, and how that we have focused on what is really sort of finite and even to some extent abiotic, so that we're extracting minerals, we're making things, and we're looking at the things that we make, and we're saying that they're more valuable than life itself. And that allows us to destroy life on the planet, but it isn't true, because we've just made a mistake long ago and then compounded the error generation by generation by teaching people that somehow materialism is more valuable. And so the camps movement, which is reflected in the work you're doing, is also is something I started having dreams that people were going to just restore the earth, and we didn't need the governments or the international agencies or the scientists to tell us what to do. And here's a little film that came out of that.
The movement that we're building here together is about bringing back hope. It's about bringing back purpose in life.
The biggest problem that exists on our planet Earth now is climate change.
So as a result, we're facing so many problems, but the solution to them is the same. We start restoring the ecology, the ecosystems.
If we apply regenerative techniques to bring it back to life, this is enough to reverse climate change.
The purpose of ecosystem restoration camps is to restore land that has been degraded by humans.
What we need to do is go to the historically degraded landscapes, which were once the Garden of Eden.
Volunteers can come from around the world, or they can be local community members, volunteering 5 hours a day, helping to restore the planet.
We are ecosystem restoration camps. You're not waiting for somebody else to do the work. You join a group that is actually restoring this planet.
I quit my studies to come here to do a little bit of service, to give myself to the planet.
This is the thing that I wanted to do. This is the tribe that I want to join. Can be a solution bigger than the things that I can do alone.
This is where I want to be. This is what I want to be doing.
We need to stand up together. We're a new international of green-minded people.
It's a viral concept. That's why it's so strong. It starts with one camp. A lot of people going through that camp, they bring the idea home. They may start new camps.
To go from a very degraded ecosystem back to a fully functional ecosystem, everybody opened their eyes and are like, oh, it's that simple.
Desert used to be productive lands and could be made productive again.
It is possible to change a landscape from a desert and to completely regreen it so that there's food, water, and wildlife in abundance.
I think the camp also can teach us that we can live with very simple, eat the food we grow, sleep under the stars, and still have our comfort.
Camps is a simple way. People get closer to the earth and to the ecosystems themselves, and it's easy to implement and it doesn't leave traces.
great place to experiment for scientists, a great place to learn how to grow food, how to become more self-sufficient.
Soil is the basis of life.
If you have a soil that has no life, nothing good can grow from there.
So by restoring the ecosystem, which involves restoring the soil, adding more organic matter to the soil and more life, that soil will hold the water much longer, will hold much more nutrients, and that way bring back fertility.
As we start planting trees, we start taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, we start that process of reversing climate change.
This area in Spain, for example, is one of the most abandoned areas in Spain. Degradation of the ecosystem mirrors in the degradation of society.
Not just about restoring the land, it's also about restoring the societies, restoring people.
With new people coming in and new knowledge coming in, connecting with local. So the bakery at the local village has a better business too.
Farmers will be an example of how to do things that they can copy on their land.
Be an inspiration for the region, for other farmers who are here struggling, but also for young people maybe to come back to the land and like see that farming actually can be cool.
Let's kind of bring back the spirit of childhood, of game, but of projects, of doing things together. I think that the camp will bring back that possibility of playing like a kid, but with a purpose.
So the more that ordinary people like you and me are able to stand up and support it, the more momentum that it's going to get.
Many initiatives all around the world are popping up. Everybody wants to make a camp now. That's fantastic, and that's what we wanted. We wanted to inspire the people to take initiative.
You can come to camp. I think that would be a really great option for someone who is available and wants to do something meaningful. They're going to be offering permaculture design courses here. But if you can't come, you can become a member of ecosystem restoration camps by donating €10 per month. That's just a really simple way to basically make these camps a reality.
We want to restore the earth. We want to live in the beautiful paradise that the earth is.
Come to ecosystem restoration camps and make part of the solution. Join other like-minded people who say, yeah, we can do it. We can reverse this biggest problem ever existed.
Going back to the ground, getting dirty, getting back to the soul with love, with joy, with compañerismo and camaradería is definitely going to make this happen.
So it's pretty interesting. There's now 60 camps in 6 continents, and that's in just about 6 years. So this is growing really fast, and I think it's a way for people to actually have a role to play in all the work, and I think what we're doing when we do this is that we're bringing the life synergy from all these people together to do something that needs to be done on the earth. And I think the governments and many other people, they're not really thinking about these things because they're focused on things which are less important. So that's what I wanted to share with you. And there's a lot of very specific things about food security, and there's some very important aspects that I think are really where we're at right now, which is to build the social infrastructure. We kind of know what needs to be done. We need to restore biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter all over the world. But on the other hand, we also have these greater problems which are emerging with huge disasters from floods and droughts and wildfires and hurricanes and earthquakes and so on. And there's also there's war and vast numbers of refugees. So the kind of things that I've been recommending right now for social infrastructure are central kitchens, which allow communities to connect the producers of food with the people who are hungry, and to avoid the idea that food is a commodity, but consider that food is a right. And that also means that we could apply some ecological concepts, like the idea that in nature there's no waste. So why is there waste in the food system? And I mean, if you actually calculate what's going on in the global food system, probably, as much as 40%, maybe 50% is lost. So this makes no sense whatsoever. And especially when we see that there are large numbers of people who are hungry. So communities by themselves can answer this by connecting their producers with central kitchens, and they can employ everybody in feeding the people who need to be fed, and that's all of us. And then at the same time, processing all the surplus so that it can be eaten later. And then and another thing that I've been thinking about is creator spaces, because I've been looking at most of the places where I'm asked to advise are places that have been where the fertility and resources have been exploited and extracted, and now you're left with a ruined landscape. So I think the future is not about the future definitely has us restoring degraded landscapes that have been degraded over historical time, but we can stop extracting by recycling and upcycling all the things that have been taken out. And maybe we can stop the concept that, because if we have, so the second thing that I've been talking about besides central kitchens is creator spaces, where we can actually recycle everything and give people access to repair everything or build new things and use the existing materials and make art again, make things that last and that your grandchildren and great-grandchildren are still using generations from now, rather than have a bunch of homogenized kind of junk that gets thrown out every once in a while, so you want a new one. Instead of that, let's just be more rational. And then the third thing is cultural stages, so that we can have music and dancing and theater and movies, and not also just consume homogenized culture from Hollywood or wherever. And I mean, how many zombies and vampires and hitmen do we actually need to see? I mean, once you've seen it, I think you can say, well, I don't want that. Let's not have vampires and zombies and hitmen and war. Let's have communities that function to take care of everyone. So that's what I've been thinking about, and I'm happy to answer any questions that I possibly can. I have been to over 90 countries around the world, so looking at these concepts, and I'd be happy to share anything that I can with you.
Yeah, what we'll do now is there's leave space
for
asking questions.
Thank you, John.
If there's any questions you'd like to ask of John, or
I think we've heard it. So thank you for sharing that.
And we can do that for another
Solidarity Network or Solid Network. Thank you.
I was chatting with John there in the breakout room.
Yeah, what we'll do now is there's
and we were just talking about
asking questions.
If
there's any questions you'd like to ask
60
of
camps
John,
set up now as a result of the national camp.
And we can do that for another. Yeah.
I just wonder where does financial support comes in. I was chatting with John there, and because that's some of the issues we'd be struggling with our, the project we've going in Cavan. There's not a whole pile of support given to the behind the scenes working, and the reality is they have to live you know, they have to live. There's still bills to pay and stuff like that. So it's always been a struggle, in my experience of how these things get funded and supported, and or is anyone else experiencing anything like that?
John, do you have anything you'd like to add in there, come in there with?
Well, I would just like to say it's a struggle for all the people who are trying to do this anywhere in the world. But some people are breaking through. And I have noticed personally that there are two ways to look at this. On the one hand, you have a kind of traditional employment concept where, like, if you give me money, then I'll do something. But if you don't give me any money, then I'm just not going to do anything. Or you could look at like, this needs to be done. We have no fertility. We have no water. We're destroying the climate. And say, well, that's what needs to be done. And then do it. And if you do it, you're actually creating value. And so this is a different, different economic perspective. One of the things that we're working on, because everyone has the same problem. So we're working on this concept. I don't know if you've been following what's happening with cryptocurrencies or blockchain or community currencies, but essentially what you have in terms of government currencies, those are called fiat currencies. And right now they have some structural problems in that they're, generally speaking, in the Western world especially, debt-based. And so when you make money, you're creating debt. So you're indebting the people who get the money. And what we've seen with the rise of cryptocurrencies is that it's actually legal to make currencies. And that if you make a currency that is based on, well, the traditional definition of money would be it's a storehouse of value, a means of exchange, and it's a trust mechanism. So if we create a currency that is a trust mechanism, and it's only traded with those people who are inside the circle of trust, that's one thing, because there's another problem, which is that many of, or most, if not all, of the cryptocurrencies are not about creating value. They're about speculation to make money. So I think we need to look at it from a different point of view. We want to create real value as opposed to try to speculate and help few people, but disadvantage others. We want to figure out a way to go forward. So there is a plan to make a new currency, and this could be important for those people who are working in it, and they could trade the currency and keep value in the currency. And then there's also a discussion of how to make that exchangeable for fiat currencies if you want to buy something on the market. But I think what we're seeing is that the markets don't do everything that they're cracked up to do. They advantage those who control the markets. And so if we had a currency that was made to create value, and it was rewarded, people were rewarded for creating value, then that value would continuously grow. And that would incentivize more and more people to do what needs to be done. It's a completely different and quite challenging idea. But so is restoring ecological function on a planetary scale. So if you like giant challenges, then I kind of like giant challenges. And my feeling is that when you try to do this, then you're already kind of, it's quixotic, in the sense that you're tilting at windmills or something. But when you agree to do it and you enjoy doing it and it brings you satisfaction, strangely, you're continuously creating value. And when you create value over long periods of time, either the society rewards you or it doesn't. And I've noticed, for instance, Van Gogh never sold any paintings. And now if you try to buy a Van Gogh painting, it's like hundreds of millions of dollars. Or Mozart died in poverty, and that was kind of strange. He was a genius. So it doesn't mean that you didn't create value. It means that the society failed to understand it. But now we're at a crisis point where actually there will be no economy and there will be no governments if the climate changes continue at the rapid pace that they're going. So somebody's going to have to suck it up and restore the Earth's ecosystems, or we're all going to face the consequences.
Yeah.
So that's my feeling.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Imelda, for that too. So Hannah's asked a question. She says her internet's not great, so she doesn't think her internet's going to. But she'd love to hear it from Shiltcree or from John about how ecosystem restoration can or is alleviating poverty local to camps, maybe similar to previous questions, thinking about ways to lift barriers for people getting involved and examples.
Well, if you may want to add something to this, but I was telling, I think that, as I mentioned before, I think that central kitchens, creator spaces, and cultural stages are really a way to have this social infrastructure that allows communities to grow their own culture, local culture, and that helps everybody moving forward. And at the same time, that allows you to get to the point where you can organize food as a right instead of food as a commodity, and allows you to recycle and upcycle all the stupid junk that's been produced unnecessarily in the past and stop with the extraction and consumption model. And then it also allows you to be organized enough that you can actually have a local currency that would work, because you'd have sufficient numbers of people in a circle of trust and they could trade between each other and they would all know where the value was being created, and they would reward each other for this. And that would lead to growth. And we can no longer really have growth in the existing economy without having more and more collapse. So what we do need is growth, but that growth has got to be in something which is sustainable and renewable, and that benefits not only the people who are alive today, but the people who are going to come after us. So we can do that if we create an economy which is based on restoring the ecological function and valuing it higher than things. And so this is, I think, the sort of the answer to that. But it also requires trust, and it means collaboration instead of competition. So we've been taught to compete, but competing is not in our best interest. Our best interest is to collaborate with one another and work together, because the sum of our energy is greater than the sum of the parts. So if we all work together, we can do amazing things. But if we all compete, then it's quite difficult. So
yeah, I know I'll add to Hannah's question then too, is like, I'm doing a lot of workshops with schools at the moment, secondary schools too, and what I do with this walking debate, one of the questions, is the problem poverty or is the problem wealth? You know, is it the problem that people have too little, or is it that some people have so much? So it's systematic change, I think it is. But the other thing I do in the workshop is, if you there's a film and it's on Netflix, Kiss the Ground, and there's a part of John's work on it, 5 minutes. And John, I think that's actually, for me, it's the best bit, because it's 5 minutes and it gives such a good overview of the Liz Plateau. And now one of the workshops things we have to look at is the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm not the biggest fan of Sustainable Development Goals because the structure's not too, but But I do think they're useful for, like, if you look at mapping out 17 issues the world faces, and they're there. And so what I often do is I show that video. It's a 5-minute clip of the Liz Plateau and essentially what you showed today. But then you go, how many of the SDGs are impacted by restoring the ecosystem? So you talk about people lifted, hundreds of millions lifted out of poverty. There's top food. You can see much more food at the market. They're going to people whose parents are illiterate going to university, life on land, and then in the hope and a change of climate, but all the topsoil being washed out. So you got life below water, partnership for the goals. So it's like the project of restoring ecosystems has all these knock-on effects. So it's like the problems are interconnected, but so are the solutions. Start working on one, but I think we need that understanding of the structural causes too. So, but yeah, it's that interconnectedness too, and it's the whole, Hannah, which you'd be very familiar with the transition town movement and alternative currencies and that too. So, Jamie's asked a question now. Jamie, do you want to come in and ask that question so it's not just male voices rabbiting on, and we have some? Maybe
I'm not sure if she can.
Maybe can't. So her question is, my question is so simple. So why is it so incredibly hard to achieve? That's what was leading me up to asking in our breakout group before I left abruptly.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it maybe sounds simple, but I don't think it actually is simple. I think that human civilization is about patterned behavior. We're repeating again and again and again the same things that have happened in the past. So there have been many civilizations that have grown to sort of places where I'm sure, like if you were in ancient Rome, or you were in ancient China, or you were in ancient Egypt, or ancient Mayan civilization or something, you'd probably think you were at the climax of civilization, but all of them are gone, more or less. I mean, they've transitioned and they're not the dominant culture. And that's because, and each culture that comes after them repeats the behavior. So, they destroy the hydrology, the soil fertility, and lose the biodiversity, and then that place is no longer the dominant place. But we can't do that anymore because now we have such an enormous population on a planetary scale. So there's no place to create a new civilization. You have to transform this civilization, and this civilization is global. Oh, and there's a little one coming in to join us. That's the future of the world. All of you are doing your part to make sure the future. Yes, really good. So, I think that it's not simple, but it's about compassion, and it's about love, and it's about working together. And if we're willing to do that, I think that's what we need. And if we repeat the behavior of the past, we're going to get the same result. And actually, the result's getting worse. So, like the level of degradation that we're seeing is beyond anything that we've seen in the past. So now you can have a satellite image with 3 gigantic hurricanes in one picture at the same time, coming one after the other to wipe out huge areas. I remember, like, I need a sign. Well, how many signs do you need? Like if a hurricane will take out a major city like New Orleans, is that enough? Or how about taking out an island, an entire island? How about doing it twice or 3 times? Or when is it enough signs? Have you got enough signs? How about an undersea earthquake that takes out multiple nuclear power plants and spreads radioactivity throughout the world? Or, I mean, we haven't even touched on the toxins that are being released from industrial agriculture and industry of all kinds, and what that does and how long and how difficult that is to remove from the system. And that's what needs to be done. So, we need to take these things on. If we don't take these things on, then we're just kicking the can down the road. And, we owe it to the young people, if we understand these things, to make sure that, we face this. I remember in Japan when the Fukushima plant happened, all these old people said, okay, we'll go to do the cleanup, because they said, well, we're going to die anyway. Let's not send the young people there. Let's send the old people there. And that's, like, ooh, but okay, I think we're going to have to step up. Now's the time. You need heroes because, and you need new ideas. You're not going to be able to do things with the same ideas, because if you use the same ideas, you get the same result. So we know what that result is. We need to know whether we can have a different one.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from anybody that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'll go. Maybe it's not a question, but just like ask you to talk more about maybe pollution and the kind of growing movement of micro-remediation. Because I find that really interesting and something I'm waiting to embrace as soon as I can. And then the other topic would be like urban areas, and like how do you see them fitting into the ideal future?
Well, yes. Paul Stamets is a good friend of mine, and I must say I'm taking quite a lot of mushrooms every day now because of him, and I feel like it's helpful. But yes, I think the main thing I would say is that all of these questions are not simple ones; they're complex, and that the best idea is to use collaborative inquiry for collective intelligence, because it's not really fair to anyone to say, well, you solve it, no, you solve it, and I think the real answer is that we have to solve it, like humanity together as a species on a planetary scale has to decide the central intention of human civilization is to ensure that life can survive, that civilization can survive. Now that's a goal. And then within that, you can break it down to lots and lots of things, but we definitely need biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter, because that's going to determine whether we have functional ecosystems, whether we have normal gas exchange, because when you understand what carbon sequestration is, then you understand it's basically photosynthesis. And for 3.8 billion years, the plant materials have been co-creating a canopy and a ground cover and living soils that pull the moisture down into the lower atmosphere. And when they do that, they lower the surface temperatures. And when humans take away the vegetation and they take away the soils, then the solar radiation directly hits the surface of the earth. And this creates thermic drafts, which push the moisture into the upper atmosphere. And like micro-remediation, it works. Soil creation works. We can make 17 days, if you do really good aeration and you know exactly what you're doing, you can make enormous amounts of organic soils as long as you've got organic materials to work with. And biodiversity, we can create botanical sanctuaries where I can think of numerous ways to save all of the endangered species, but it has to be our central intention. It has to be what we say we're going to do. And when we do that, when we say that, and when we do that, we're creating value. So we have to create a monetary system and an economic system which is based on true value, not based on rewarding people for creating pollution and destroying things.
So, John, can I just ask you then to add to that then, in terms of, because this course of projects about creating resilient food systems. So we've talked a lot about ecosystem restoration. So then, and like food security obviously comes into that too. So how could we create food systems that do restore ecosystems as well? That's win-win-win. So restores, sequesters carbon, builds biodiversity, feeds people, regenerates communities. You know, if you have anything to say on that.
I do. I think it's really, I think I mentioned it, but maybe you don't see quite the linkages, but I think we have to have central kitchens, and we have to connect the food producers with the people who are hungry. And that's all of us. So instead of having food as a market commodity, so we're going to have to take on this economic reasoning. So the economic reasoning that says you can buy a, I don't know, cucumber grown in Israel and ship it to Ireland, you know, is like, what? Why would you, you know, how is that possibly a good idea? Because, you know, the economics of it is wrong, because you have a lot of waste and you have this thing. So basically there are hidden subsidies or not so hidden subsidies in all of these things. And so the markets are manipulating the people, and the people are not actually treated as people, they're treated as consumers. So, you know, we're not consumers, we're human beings. How dare they call us consume? You know, we consume things, but that's not our identity. If that's our identity, we're really at a low level of consciousness. And what we need now is a very high level of consciousness, where we understand that we're not only individuals, but we're part of a species. And that if, as a species, we work together on a planetary scale, these would not be so difficult to solve. But if we don't, if we continue to realize that, okay, over a very long historical time, actually it's not that long in comparison to evolutionary time, but let's say 10 to 12,000 years since settled agriculture. So if you look at 3.8 billion years of evolutionary succession, and then you look at 12,000 years of settled agriculture, and you think, what has that done? That's created domination by a small minority of the vast majority of people and the vast majority of land. I mean, how could there be people with no land? You know, you have to already accept the idea, like, I marched in and, you know, murdered some people and I stole the land, it's mine. You know, I stole it and it's mine is a legal argument. You know, it's kind of hard to put this together, but over 12,000 years, this has definitely happened. I mean, people went into Africa, grabbed the strongest and the most beautiful and took them to another part of the world and said, you're slaves and we can kill you and rape you and whatever it is. And, you know, like, what? You know, like, what? How can you do that? So, okay, Wilberforce and others came and said, well, that's not really morally okay. So that we won't do that anymore, except that we're going to create a debt-based economy, which basically makes everybody a wage slave. So now you have all these people who are working just for money. Like if you ask yourself, why am I doing this? And the answer is they give me money. That's not a very good answer, you know. So, you know, how do we answer all of those things simultaneously? And because it's about life, it's about what is our life? How do we feel about what we do with our life's energy? And, you know, I'm 70 years old, so I'm like saying, well, you know, it's not really about me pretty soon. It's going to be about those who come after me, because I've lived a very interesting life and a full life, and I'm not so unsatisfied about what I've done, but I want to see that it's better, not to accept the things which are wrong, but to change the things that we can't accept. So that's so thank you so much for, you know, inviting me and listening to me. At 70 years old, you know, I'm amazed that anybody wants to listen to my ideas, but there it is. So I will talk your ear off if you let me.
Brilliant, thank you. And so we will see, yeah, so we're meeting face to face next week or on Saturday. So really looking forward to hosting it up in Monaghan to begin the connection and see where this goes from. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.